Hungry Trilobyte podcast would like to start by acknowledging SoonerCon. The longest running pop culture con in Oklahoma has a new look, a new mascot, and a fantastic guest list. Join us in Norman, Oklahoma, June 30th through July 2nd, 2023, and meet celebrities such as Billy West, John Scalzi, Erica Harlicker, and John Swasey. Visit SoonerCon.com to reserve your membership.
On tap today, we have Kinsey Burke. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing excellent. How are you?
I'm great. Now, my audience is mostly going to know you from your work on the Metal Jesus Rocks channel, but you've got a lot of fun stuff going on your own. You've got a great video blog on YouTube detailing your tour of Japan, and you've got a cool gig working with a really fun indie development studio. So the reason I wanted to reach out to you was I talked to a lot of people who are really into fandom, but to take the next step of saying, hey, I like this thing so much, I'm going to move across the planet. Yeah. I really wanted to see how that came about.
Right? It's kind of a leap. Like, I have loved Japan my whole life. Like a lot of kids my age. When I was in high school, I took Japanese and I was like in the anime club and I was like a huge weeb. So it kind of started there. And my grandfather actually flew for Japan Airlines. So he used to give me like gifts and stuff from Japan all the time growing up. So I think it was like instilled early. And then I like got really into anime and video games, of course, and collecting, and everything kind of snowballed. And I visited Japan a few times on vacation and just loved it. But the most random part is I kind of thought moving there was like not a possibility. So I didn't really try that hard. But like I met Mark Luntz, who's our biz dev director at Chuhai Labs, and I met him on Twitter and we started talking. And then like I was talking about looking for a full-time role in the games industry because at the time I was working freelance with Devolver. And he was like, oh, well, if you're looking for a full-time role and you already like Japan, have you thought about moving here? Kind of. And like, it's weird that that's how it happened, but it is. And I interviewed for the position and I got it. And here we are.
And see, it's interesting to me because most people I know who really got into Japan got into it first because they got into games and anime, and they didn't necessarily get into Japan first. You're one of the few people I've ever spoken to who said the opposite.
Yeah. Like, I think it was just like instilled at an early age from my grandparents bringing me gifts. Like they gave me a kimono when I was like maybe 10.
Okay.
And I was like, and of course, like I didn't understand much like about it. I was like, whoa, it's so cool. And like they gave me all like the Japan Airlines merch. So from there, I got into, and I don't even think I bridged the gap too much to be like, oh, I love Japan, let me look into anime and video games. Like I think it all just kind of happened organically on its own.
So looking through your history on YouTube, you're one of the people, like a lot of retro gamers, you do the collection, or you did the collection. The collection was a huge part of, because you go back to find the stuff you couldn't get before. You amass your Xbox 360 controllers, for one thing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And then you move to a country that doesn't have a whole lot of free space.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
I actually sold like 80% of my collection to move here because I owned so many things. There's no way like I was going to move it all. And there's no way that I wanted to trust it in like a storage unit where I couldn't get to it if something happened. So I sold 80% of it. My most valuable things that I really wanted to keep, it's only like 3 tubs and it's at my parents' house. And then I brought a few things with me. I brought my like current systems that I'm playing right now. I brought all the mini systems, and then I brought the collections that I knew I could complete in Japan.
Okay.
So, which also felt kind of strange because that was a lot of games I bought in Japan on previous trips, and then I paid to bring them back.
And for anybody who doesn't really follow retro gaming, there is a huge especially for anything pre-1995, there is a whole different flavor to some systems if you get the Japanese, like Saturn being a really big one, NES
Yeah.
not,
Yeah, like the selection is completely different over here, and it's so much fun to game hunt. Although the weirdest feeling that I've been getting, I don't know if anyone else has had, like if you downsize,
Mhm.
like a massive downsize, it's kind of hard to start accumulating stuff again because how annoying it is to downsize.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
It
Like
does
I
make a lot of
haven't,
sense.
yeah, like I haven't been buying nearly as much stuff as I thought I would. I thought I would go crazy. Like on every trip here, I would always bring an empty suitcase to just fill with games to bring back. But now I'm like much more selective with what I buy just because downsizing is such a pain.
Okay, let me ask, when specifically did you start downsizing? What year?
It was about when I got the job at Chuhai Labs. And
Okay.
oh, and then for those of you that don't know, I am a producer at Chuhai Labs, and that's the job I moved to Japan for. And I started downsizing when I got the job, and after my like whatever month probationary period that I knew I was gonna keep the job. And once I knew I was moving to Japan, I was like looking around my game room in Seattle, and I was like, oh no, I gotta do something.
Well, it's just,
And like being COVID, like I would have just gone to conventions and sold everything because that's way easier, but there was no conventions.
sure.
So I had to like sell it piece by piece. And online selling, I kind of hate because it's like a lot of work. And so yeah, it was rough.
Okay, but see, knowing happened during COVID makes a
Mm,
lot of sense because or at least around 5 years ago, that's something when we have all the flashcards, all the CD loader mods. There are
mhm,
so many ways to play old games on the original hardware that
mhm.
we didn't have even 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
The need to have the big shelf full of stuff suddenly becomes a lot less. And that wasn't the case for most of our collecting life.
Yeah, definitely. And I was kind of surprised too, because like when all those things came out, part of me expected prices to maybe go down on
Mhm,
retro stuff, but if anything, they went up, especially during COVID.
mhm, mhm.
So, like, I think I think it's just for two different people. Like the people who will play either on emulators or flashcards to play on the original hardware is different from the people who want to buy it all and have
Mhm.
all the original carts and discs and everything.
Some of it comes down to, and I don't want to paint anybody with a broad brush. That's not my goal
Mhm.
here. But really, when you play the game, are you really looking to get the same experience you would have had way back in the day? Are you looking to experience something new? Or do you just like to have widgets?
Right? Because there is a part of me that when I had my big collection, like, did I play all of those games all the time? Of course not, you know?
No.
But it was really great to look at.
And when you work in at a con or at a store, or you have people sending you stuff, you have people selling you stuff. So many things pass through your hands. It's like, wow, I never thought I'd hold one of these.
Yeah, definitely. And like I had that happen so many times, especially because like before I worked in the games industry, I worked at a video game store.
Mhm.
And I did that for years and years and years. So I saw all kinds of things pass through. And then that's even more hard because I'm the first person to see it come in the store. And then I'm like, well, obviously I'm putting this on hold for myself. I'm going to buy
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
Like it's
And
accumulated so much.
and then you start to realize, and maybe stop me if I'm wrong, stop me if I'm completely off base here, but I did look at cons for many, many years, and I had
Mhm.
kind of this revelation about 2, 3 years in that you're going to get to a point where you realize those once in a lifetime purchases are not really once in a lifetime.
Yeah, yeah, with very few exceptions, but yes.
Mhm. Yeah, so you realize if you get that rare game in your hand and maybe you can't afford it, maybe you're not sure you want it, if you give it another 6 months, you'll have another shot.
Yeah, yep.
And
And
that
I think there's
stops you.
only been like a few items that I was like, okay, this is special. I might not see this again.
Mhm.
And that's usually more like prototypes or like things that are like really numbered. Like when I bought the like Live Turns 5 Xbox 360 controller,
Mhm.
It was like the second opportunity I had in my whole life to buy one. And I was just like, well, crap.
Yeah, that's a gimme for sure.
Yeah.
But looking at your shopping in Japan now, the shopping that you do let yourself do, what's it like? Because back in the 90s, it was always like that was the golden palace of places you could go to buy retro games. And I hear that's not really the case anymore.
Yeah, the prices have definitely started to go up here as well. Because it used to be like, oh, like just get the import version. It's like monumentally cheaper. And it's the case for some games, but overall, everything has gone up a lot. But you can still find really good deals here because, like, it depends on where you go. Granted, places like Super Potato, it's gonna have like the best selection, and that's kind of like the most famous retro game shop in Japan. For those of you who don't know, and it's amazing. Pink Gorilla, when it was Pink Godzilla, was originally modeled after, because the old owner like went to Japan, saw Super Potato, and was like, "That's amazing! I'm gonna do it in Seattle." So like it's a really famous retro game store, and it's awesome. And don't let people tell you it's not worth a visit, because their selection is incredible, but so are their prices. They're kind of high.
Sure.
But you can find a lot of stuff still, like even like Hard Offs, which is like a hilariously named kind of thrift store. Some of those can have excellent selections, and especially if you look in the like junk section, which that usually just means untested. It doesn't mean it's broken necessarily. It could be broken, but so there's still good deals out there, especially if you get out of the city.
I remember reports that made it sound like you could get Japanese only Virtual Boy games on every Kmart. They were basically in 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, that's not quite the case anymore. But like it's still, I think, a lot easier to find good deals here than in the US.
Okay, fair enough. I would hope so, because I still have my hopes up.
Yeah, there's still some excellent shopping to do. And especially like if you're a collector, you probably have like a bin of cords at home. And like you can buy like really cheap like Super Famicoms and stuff that just don't have cords or controllers or anything. And even though some of those are like, 1,000 yen, 500 yen in some cases, so $5-10. So there's still like deals to be had.
And I'm thinking, and this is just me here, pardon me if I'm out of line, but it's like, if you can afford to fly to Japan and spend a week, not the cheapest country in the world to exist.
Yeah.
You can pay a couple extra yen for a video game deal. That's just my perspective here.
Yeah,
you don't take the trip
definitely.
halfway across the world to be pinching pennies.
Right. And Japan, you can travel like relatively cheaply once you're here. So you'll have the budget for games.
But Chuhai Labs, I like what they do. I'm looking over it. I haven't played anything they've done because I'm really looking forward to their next release. But what are you working on right now with them?
Right now, we're just working on supporting Curse to Golf.
Okay.
So we launched it 6 months ago. No, sorry. Yeah, but about 6 months ago. Last August, we launched it. So right now, it's just working on some like quality of life updates and making sure it's the best game that it can be.
So this is a game that has legs on it. You're going to give it a long stream of support.
Yeah, we're hoping to. Yeah.
Okay. Because when I saw the Curse to Golf, like, well, it's a fun concept. I'm just hoping it becomes one of those games that, people that becomes one of those games that just kind of keeps going and going, and you get a lot of support down the road.
Yeah, because like it's such a like fun, unique idea. Like it's like, it's a golf like is what we call it. It's a rogue like golf game. That's you go through like a bunch of dungeon like holes, and it's like really challenging, but you can be really creative with all of the like power-ups. So it has a lot of replayability, and hopefully we can put a long tail on it just so it can keep going and we can keep supporting our players.
I heard about it and I immediately wanted to put it in the same conversation as like Mutant League football and full combat basketball. It's like it's a sports game, but it's more of a spoof than the actual sport.
Right. It's a sports game that's not a sports game.
And for somebody like me who I kind of like sports, but I want to do something a little different when I play a video game.
Yep.
That's
Yeah, exactly. And like, it's so weird. There's something about golf games. I love golf games, like Golf Story and like Neo Turf Masters. Like, there's so many excellent golf games out there, but in real life, not so much. I'm not a no, no, thank you.
I like golf games too, but here's the catch: is that almost all of them are roughly the same in terms of playability. It's a physics puzzle, which is not a bad thing, but it's really hard to put a different spin on that. No pun intended.
You just got to put it in a dungeon and add some rockets.
I mean, you already have a weapon, so add a little bit of that combat to it.
Right? Exactly.
Who came up with this?
It was all thought up by our director, Liam Edwards. So this is his baby. And yeah, he came up with the whole idea. He's the lead designer, director, everything.
Okay, fair enough. The visuals are adorable, and that to me is a big deal. It doesn't look cookie cutter. It doesn't look like something that just got rolled out of Unity.
Yeah, our amazing artist John Davies, he's wonderful, and he did all the art for us, and then our other artist Nathan Scott did all of the UI, and they just did like an amazing job. It looks so good.
Do you play in your off hours?
I do.
Okay,
especially when it first launched, because like I did a lot of play testing for it, because our team is really only like 3 people and then 2 contract artists, and we also had our great narrative designer, of course, and our composer, but like in office there was only 3 of us, and we don't have like a QA department at Chuhai. There's only 15 of us there, and so but golf was only 3 of us in office, so I was doing a lot of the QA testing, so I was playing it like non-stop before it came out. But then like the first time I played it almost as a fan and not as working, I was like, okay, this is great. I love this.
What's it like working for a game studio in 2023 compared to the way we thought it was going to be when we were kids and dreaming of that amazing video game job?
Man, that's a really good question. When I was a kid, it was weird. Like I almost didn't even think video games could be a job. As weird as that sounds, because obviously somebody was making them. But just in my wildest dreams, I never thought that I would ever be making games. And I think making games is incredibly rewarding and it's a lot of fun, but it is a lot more work, I think, than people think. Like, it gives you a whole new perspective when you play games for fun. Like, for example, whenever you put out a game and it's a single player game, the first thing a lot of people say or complain about is, oh, why doesn't this have multiplayer? And like, I used to think like that too. I'd be like, oh, well, that would be cool if we had multiplayer or whatever. But a lot of times on a single player game, making a multiplayer mode, it's just making a whole nother game.
Yeah.
So like almost twice the time and twice the budget. So it makes you think about it in a way different way when you play games.
Sure. And that honestly never made a whole lot of sense to me, that you immediately say, why does this single player game have to be multiplayer? Because I play a lot of my games as single player.
Yeah, I do too, actually.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily want you to add the multiplayer aspect. I'm glad if you can. If you can make it and make it work, that's great. But it's not an immediate ask.
Yeah. And it's like I guess it's not surprising, but it's like the first thing most people ask for.
Like I'm thinking of something like a Metroid, where the whole thing is the exploration and the problem solving. I can't think of a way to just shoehorn it. And I know there have been multiplayer Metroids. It's been done, but why? Yeah.
Then it almost feels like, unless you go full into it, it can feel tacked on. Like, I guess, sort of, for example, even though I loved it, I just know most people didn't love it. The multiplayer in Donkey Kong 64, it was pretty much just a GoldenEye ripoff. And I loved it. But a lot of people thought it felt like really, it was just there to be multiplayer.
And that's totally fair. And Donkey Kong 64 is a very polarizing title. Actually, the N64, now that I think about it, really does have a lot of those titles where it was like, you either really, really like this game for what it's supposed to be, or you just
Mhm.
think it's trash.
Yep. And I think that because it was like the first console with 4 controller ports, they were just like, every game has to be every game.
Mhm, mhm.
All the 64. I love it.
Okay, that's a good thing. I mean, I'm a fan.
Mhm.
Think my impression has softened a little bit as I've gone back to it. But what do you like about it more than anything else?
I think it's driven on a lot of nostalgia for me because
Okay.
like I did play like NES and Genesis. I didn't have a Super Nintendo as a kid. I was a Genesis kid. But like I played that a lot, but I was pretty young. And then like when the 64 came out, there was a brief period where I didn't really play games because when I was a kid, games were not like cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was in junior high. I was the prime age to want to be cool. So I spent a while not playing any games and I like just rode my horse and did kid stuff. And then one day I came home from school and my little brother was trying to play Ocarina of Time and he couldn't beat Queen Goma because he was really young. And so I helped him beat it and all of a sudden I was back in. Like that Hyrule Field pan, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Oh my god, I think I like games again." And then I got like deep into the 64. So I think a lot of it's nostalgia driven because to be fair, a lot of the graphics like don't age very well and it looks like
No,
pretty janky. But the 64 walked, so the Switch could run.
sure.
They had to switch to 3D eventually and it wasn't going to be pretty.
It wasn't pretty, and a lot of the games struggled with the transition.
Yeah.
That's the nicest way I can say it. And you can't fault them too much because it was their first go out.
Yeah.
But what a lot of other people who are younger than us might not get is that
Mhm.
the N64 PS1 rivalry was a big deal at the time, and it
Oh,
was
yeah.
that came down to what style of game you like, if you were taken seriously by other people in the conversation. And there were
Mhm.
so many games that were on one system and not the other, and the whole concept in some case was different. It wasn't just like,
Yeah.
well, today where it's like, well, you have an Xbox and a S and a PS5 and it's basically the same game.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember when I got the PlayStation 1 for Christmas, and I got it like way after the 64, and I that was the day I abandoned the 64. I discovered RPGs and I never looked back.
Yeah, I remember really being into a lot of the quirky games on the N64 because it was the choice I made because basically
Yeah.
Zelda.
Yeah. Yeah, like Chameleon Twist,
Mhm.
like Iggy's Wrecking Balls. There's so many weird ass games on the 64 and I love it.
The one I want to ask you about is Mission
Mhm.
Impossible
Oh, yeah.
because I'm
I'm like,
actually a fan of that game and
mhm.
nobody else is.
That's awesome. I can
I
honestly say I don't remember if I've ever played it. I
Okay.
did have it in my collection.
I think the problem was everybody wanted a GoldenEye clone because it was based on a
Mm-hmm.
movie. It was about spies. But no, it was a stealth game before stealth games were popular.
Mm-hmm.
It was N64's answer to Siphon Filter.
Ah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and the controls were not great, but they also weren't bad by the standards of the time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I can already like think about a stealth game on the 64 being like close to impossible to play, but probably still pretty fun.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It was one of those things that if you already knew the N64 controller and how it worked and its
Mm-hmm.
little quirks, you weren't really going to have a problem.
I love, the 64 controller, like it's so divided on if people like it or not. But it's weird. The 64 controller is one of the few that I have like intense muscle memory for.
Mm-hmm.
Like trying to play something like Ocarina of Time on a different system, it just feels wrong because of how much I played it as a kid. Like the Z targeting, everything. Like I feel like I have to have a 64 controller for it.
You do.
Yeah, it feels
I
weird on
tried
anything else.
this when they brought out the Switch N64 app and
Mhm.
they brought out all the games on that. I tried playing those games on the original Switch controller and on Switch Pro controller, and it does not work.
Right?
You really need that
wrong.
special. So I went and got a USB adapter for an N64 controller, and suddenly I was back.
Yeah. It's one of the few systems that like you have to have it. Like that, and like maybe arcade games maybe is a similar thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most, yeah, you need it. It's like complete muscle memory for me.
I like the controller as a controller itself actually a lot. The only real problem is that it's a single analog controller, and there are very few single analog games out there. You either need duals or full D-pad.
Yep.
So it's this weird little oddity, but it's not the weirdness that you think it is.
Yeah. And like when I was a kid, I didn't have a lot of friends who also played games. So I'm one of those unfortunate people who hold the controller, a 64 controller, 100% wrong. But I did it for so long that like I can't go back.
So you hold it on the sides, but you put your thumb on the joystick?
Oh, it's worse than that.
Okay.
I wish I had one handy to show you, but like instead of like putting my hand around that middle section and putting my thumb on the joystick, I use my right hand for basically all the buttons, because most games don't use the D-pad at all.
Okay.
So it's all the buttons, and then including the Z button. And then this hand is like holding it like a arcade joystick.
Okay.
It's so bad. Like whenever I use one now, like it's an automatic thing, but people will be like, what are you doing?
That's I don't see that as being as weird as you probably think it is. Because are you talking about the original tall N64 joystick?
Yeah, like the original 64 like controller.
Yeah, because like they have the replacements now that have a GameCube style one. It's like more of a nub. Yeah, I can't imagine doing it with that.
Oh no, that won't work. That would
but
feel
the original
weird.
tall boy, sure.
Yeah. And I didn't even think it was that weird until I did a 64 video with Metal Jesus, and he pointed it out because he was like, "What you doing?" Like,
no, that makes sense to me. I mean, I don't do it, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
And as I've come along, as I've grown up a little bit, I've started to realize that controllers should be accessible and adaptable to different personal play styles and different abilities if need be.
Yeah, definitely. Like I haven't gotten to try one yet, but that Xbox adaptive controller looks so cool, and you could use it in like so many different ways, and that's awesome.
That's the neat idea. I'm glad things are going in that direction.
Yeah. And then less for accessibility, but more for weirdness. Like at GDC, there's a section called Alt Controller, and it's just all games that are like controlled with something weird. And it was my favorite section at GDC. Like there was like a game where it's like a fishing pole, but the game is that you're playing with a cat, like a cat teaser. And that's the controller. And then there was a bicycle like off-road game where they made this controller out of a huge bicycle tire, so you're like huge wheel turning it, and like it was all things like that, and it was so cool. I love that.
I first really got my Nintendo collection going in like 95, 96, I heard about Street Cop. That was a game that you played on the power pad with a controller. And I said to myself, well, now bear in mind, I'm like 16. Okay. This is the logic I had. I could make like a virtual reality NES game if I got a power pad with a power glove.
Ooh, yeah.
Can you imagine how terrible that was?
Right? But like as a kid in your head, you're like, this is the best idea I've ever had.
Why hasn't anybody else thought of this? Because it sucks. That's why.
Yeah. But I love weird controllers. Like I am a huge sucker for them. And in Japan, there's so many. Like, and because in Japan, they tried to market like the Famicom, and in some cases the Super Famicom, as something more than a game console. Like you could like do your taxes or check your stocks or bet on a horse race. And so they have like full keyboard controllers and stuff for that. And even though I will never use it for its intended purpose, I just love that they exist. And even like I got really into like pop-in music and Taiko Drum Master and all these things that just have like weird ass controllers, and it just makes me so happy.
I feel like Japan is a little less they're a little less opposed to the idea of just buying hardware for the sake of buying hardware. In the
Yeah.
US, we're like, we don't want to spend $100 for this thing I'm going to use once. And in Japan, it's like, well, if it makes it more fun, sure, why not?
Yeah, especially back like in like kind of PS1, PS2 era. Like there was like an explosion of weird controllers, and it was amazing.
We've had N64 controller that was like the glove.
Yeah. And
And
like so many systems had like weird like keyboards, or there's like a controller only for pachinko games. And like, yeah, I bought this Hudson controller one of my first times in Japan, and it was for pachinko. And I was like, what? I don't even have a pachinko game, but it's so weird and so cool that I had to get it.
I've seen that GameCube controller with the keyboard on it that I think was for Phantasy Star.
Yeah.
It's like that every system should have something like that.
Yeah, it's so cool. And like, especially the keyboards. And nowadays, with like having to enter your username like a million times, it's great. Like, I remember on the Xbox 360, they had the chat pad that you could attach to your controller. And I just had that on my controller all the time. It was amazing. I'm sure they probably have those for the controllers nowadays, but I'm assuming they're probably more third party.
I'm sure. But here's my thing with modern systems. They all have USB ports.
Yeah, you can just use
human interface devices. The drivers to them are all universal. Why can't we just have basic USB keyboard support on every game?
Yeah, that would be amazing. I think you can use it on like any of the menus and stuff. Will always work.
Okay,
but yeah, for the most part, I know like with PlayStation, I can just hook up a keyboard and it works just fine to like type in all my login information and whatnot.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We've always had this argument that the keyboards and mice work better for first-person shooters, and if that's your preference, fine. But you've got the USB ports on there. Just give people the option.
Oh yeah, I wonder if that would work. I've never tried using a mouse on it. Maybe.
I honestly haven't either, but it just seems like it's something that should be the case. And there's not a single system out there now that doesn't have USB ports on it.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm solving the problems of the world here. I mean, that's what we're all about.
But I wonder if there's some like PC Master Race thing where if you're using a keyboard and mouse on a PlayStation, just use your computer.
Somebody's going to say you're cheating.
Right. So it's at that point, yeah.
And I'm sure the console makers are not wanting you cutting in on that sweet controller money.
Right? Because controllers are crazy expensive nowadays, I feel like.
Oh my God, how? I remember when you can get an NES pad for like $15.
Yeah, I actually went to go buy a Pro controller the other day, and I know like the yen is really weak right now, so sometimes numbers look way too big to me. But like a Pro controller, like just retail, is like 10,000 yen, which is, if it's like 1-to-1, $100. And I'm like, what? Why? I mean, with the yen the way it is, it's more like 70, which is about right for the MS like RP on a Pro controller. Yeah. But still, I'm just like, oh, like my eyes are dollar signs. Like, oh crap. I'll wait till I find one at Hardwell.
Like the one time it actually made sense was when you had the Wii U controller that actually had like a half a system crammed into it.
Right? Yeah.
And that
makes
didn't
sense.
Fly too well. I loved it personally, but it wasn't, did too hip for the room.
Yeah. I love the Wii U so much. And I never understood why they didn't make like a DS emulator, because it would be perfect. It'd be so good. It's basically a home DS.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It was the idea that you could have information that only one person had on one screen. It seems like it should have been a bigger deal.
Yeah, I think it just wasn't supported, especially by like third-party developers. Just there wasn't the library, there wasn't the support, even though it was such a cool idea. And even playing like Mario Party on there, which is arguably not a great Mario Party, but if you had the pad, you could play as Bowser. And like you could see things the other people couldn't see, and like it was just so smartly designed, and so many other games could have taken advantage of that.
And that's where Mario Maker got its start. Yeah. And there would have been such an advantage to having one person who's designing the level throw in stuff as the other people were playing.
Yeah. They would touch on that in some games. Like, I'm trying to remember what game it was, But basically it was a 1-player game, but they added like the second player could be like a fairy and you could like drop stuff in. And so many things, they were so close. They're so close. Like the idea was there. Or like in like WarioWare and Nintendo Land, like using it basically as a camera.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you're so close. You're so close. Where's Pokemon Snap? Like you're right there. But nope, just moved on to the Switch.
Yep. And the Switch is probably my favorite system ever after finally beating out the Super Nintendo. It was a long fight, but the Switch is won out.
Oh, the Switch is so good. And like, I'm not a really big like graphics 4K 120 hertz person, so that part doesn't bother me about the Switch. I know it bothers a lot of people, but like that OLED model, it's like so beautiful. It's fine that it's not 4K. It's so wonderful. I wish I had one. And I didn't even think I needed to upgrade until we got the dev kit. And the dev kit's an OLED, and I played with it and I was like, oh no, I think I need to upgrade. It's amazing.
The idea that one system can have something from almost every console ever made on it in some way, shape, or form blows my mind. I'm like, I can put Xbox games on my Nintendo? What wizardry is this?
Yeah, it's so good. I love the Switch so much. And I'm playing the new Zelda right now, and that's like basically my whole life at the moment.
I still haven't gotten through Breath of the Wild.
So good.
I love it, but it is so different, and I'm trying to appreciate the difference rather than rush through it.
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing.
For so long, I got into this thing where it's like I just played through Zelda games. I went through the motions. I found all the dungeons. I got the stuff. I finished, and this gives me a chance to not do that.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so much more exploration, and there's so much to see. So taking your time and taking it all in is definitely the best way to play either one of those games.
You were talking about when you got into the N64, or even when you found the original NES, and it's like you have that chance to appreciate it for the first time. You very rarely get that these days as an adult.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Zelda really has those feelings again. And it's been a while since I had that about a game.
I feel bad for Nintendo in some ways because they know they have to be very careful with their crown jewels.
Yes.
But they also have to keep it fresh, and that's a very tough position to be in.
Yeah, and I think with Tears of the Kingdom, they definitely nailed it because they added like crafty and more like almost Minecrafty and Fortnite elements with all of the like crafting and how creative you can be with the builds. So it keeps it really new and interesting, especially for like the younger generation, because I feel like they're way more into like Minecraft, and like Minecraft came out and I never cared because I was older. But I think this is like a perfect meld for like a big, awesome Zelda adventure, but it still has that like kind of Minecrafty Fortnite elements to keep like people of all ages wanting to play.
Sure. And not only can you build stuff, you can set it on fire, which is also always fun.
Yeah, you could just like attach a rocket to a Korok and wish him luck. Like
it's like I haven't played it, but I'm seeing the videos, and every time that happens, I have this Beavis in the back of my head saying fire, fire.
Right? Yeah. There's so many things. I'll like get it all together and I'm like, this is gonna be awesome. And then I like hit on and just chaos ensues, and it's not what I planned. And it's amazing. I'm having such a blast with it.
This is why physics in games is a good thing.
Yeah. And I saw this article actually on Tears of the Kingdom where someone interviewed a physicist, and they were talking about how the physics are actually really good and like real life, because some of the stuff that happens, you're like, what the hell? Like all of a sudden it twisted it in a way that I did not think it was going to go. And this is all weird, but apparently it's really good according to a physicist. And it's cool that that interview even happened.
Yeah. I've had a couple academics on the show in the past. I love having academics on there because to actually have qualifications on the bullshit we're discussing here,
right?
It always adds a little bit. But here's the thing: it's like when you sit down and you ask them something like this, they have a lot of fun.
Oh, I bet.
It's so cool to get them out of the classroom, get them out of the lab, wherever they happen to be, and just ask them So can we talk about lightsabers and their eyes just like pop?
That's awesome. Yeah, because actually, as random as it is, my like what I went to school for and everything is all in science. So I love that kind of shit so much. Like I went to school for environmental science, and then I worked in like a soils, rock, and asphalt lab for like almost 10 years before I did games. So I love it when people bring like real science into it, and especially when it's like fun real science.
I'm going to send you some links when we're off mic here.
Oh, perfect.
I want to thank you so much for doing this. I am having the best time here. I would love to have you back anytime, for sure.
Yeah, anytime. This was a blast.
But where can people follow your adventures on the web, and where can I put everything in the show notes?
You can follow me at Kinzilla, Kinszilla, on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all the things. I mostly just post on Instagram and Twitter. My YouTube channel has been a little bit dormant, but I'm hoping I'm going to have time to bring it back. We'll see.
Everything's going to be in the show notes on my website, aaronbossy.com. Kinsey, thank you so much for doing this, and I hope you have you back.
Thank you.